Still purple.
Hey, everybody. Boilers Extra, Nathan Baird from Indy Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
So we want to take questions in chat, but right now there's just a purple monkey with a hammer. That's not a euphemism. It's just, I don't know.
It's just something went wrong, and I don't think it's referring to Purdue's football season.
No, this is something went wrong with us, which is easier to believe even probably than Purdue football issues. But we want to talk that 49-10 loss to Penn State. We'll talk that first. We're also going to talk basketball because we didn't really do anything last night to recap the 87-78 victory over Alabama, which is obviously a huge early season win for Purdue. And just want to talk a little bit about what it means, because I think it did tell us some important things about that team and answer some maybe lingering questions. Maybe created some for Alabama actually too. But anyway, getting back to the point here, 49-10 seemed every bit as lopsided as that, if not more.
Yeah,
there was, listen, it's 14-3. They kicked the field goal instead of going for the touchdown. Didn't ask Ryan Walters about that after the game. It's kind of academic, really.
At this point, that's not the issue. That's not the storyline with Purdue's season.
As I wrote in my grades afterwards, it's like, I mean, I kind of ding him for not going for it. I think you got to be bold. But anyway, what really blew it open, though, was it was what, 20? It was either 28-3, and then they scored, or 21-3, and then they scored on 3 consecutive explosive touchdowns. 2 long runs where nobody was touched, and a touchdown pass where a guy's just waiting in the end zone like it's a punt for the ball to get there. I hadn't really ever seen something like that before. And anyway, in short, just I guess a not unpredictable result and some familiar things playing out. And I think we've come to a juncture in the season where I barely wrote about the game tonight. And in my insider for IndyStar.com, it is what it is. So now, where are things going? And I think that's an important question in a number of ways. But it's interesting to hear Ryan Walters talk about, because in any number of ways he's been asked now, how do you deal with this? How are you handling this? Isn't this tough? And him basically tonight saying pretty emphatically, I believe in myself. I believe in what we're going to do. I believe that and he did say something interesting. It's like, if everybody is working together or everybody's on the same page, something like that, like everybody in the program's on the same page. So that tells you maybe that behind the scenes, not everybody is, which is easy to imagine in a season like this, but I know all the speculation out there is what happens next from a coaching standpoint. Does Mike Bobinski stay with Ryan Walters? Does Mike Bobinski hit the reset button? And that's a very interesting question, but it's only one question that is, I think, confronting this team as we get to the end of the season.
Yeah, whether you fire him or not, that has long-term effects in terms of ticket sales, and that can't be your focus, what makes this decision or not being on future ticket sales, but that is something to consider. I imagine there's a lot of people that are off of the Purdue train if Ryan Walters is in charge that maybe don't renew. But yeah, it's not as simple as fire the coach or don't fire the coach. And I know that fans sometimes want to make it that easy, but there's a lot of once you fire the coach, you have to have a succession plan in place. And a lot of, in this day and age, you have to pretty much know who your guy is before you make the firing sometimes. So, it's why there's national search committees and things like that. But that's just kind of the start of the issue, if that's the route you go. Or if you stay, I imagine that there's fallout in the staff underneath.
There's obviously going to be fallout in the staff. Everybody on the staff, except for a couple of guys, are on expiring contracts. And so you've got staff members that are on expiring contracts, and you have players who are not under contract.
Right.
They have NIL agreements that they have to adhere to, but they are not kept here by anything. And that was what I was focusing on after this game. I was asking Ryan Walters about it. I was asking Max Clare about it. And frankly, that's not very fair of me to make him have to be the spokesperson for the talented players who have eligibility left. I wasn't asking KJ Jenkins about it because KJ Jenkins is gone. But I'm asking Max Clare about it, and I even apologized as I was asking. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry to be blunt, but some of you guys, and I know from talking to people around this program that people on this roster have already been contacted about whether they want to play
every
somewhere
other
else
program
next
in
year.
America too.
Sure, and maybe Purdue's doing it too. I don't know that. I only cover this program, but those conversations are happening, and it's time to. I thought it was time to bring that up because I think it is just as critical for Purdue to solve that than it is to pick your next who's going to be the head coach next year. Because I think if the equivalent of Nick Scouton and Deion Burks get taken off at the top of this roster every year, it does not matter who coaches this team. Purdue is going to be like a max 2 or 3 win team in perpetuity. Like there just isn't enough NFL talent on this roster. And it was crystallized for me today. I'm watching Tyler Warren for Penn State just mow down and just do whatever he wanted against Purdue today, basically, right? That's going to be an NFL tight end. That guy's got a very bright NFL future as a tight end, I think. You've got Abdul Carter on the other side, guy who was an all Big Ten linebacker last year. He's going to be an all Big Ten defensive end this year because he's that good. They could move him wherever, and he was being a presence off the edge today. And you see when, like, those aren't the only NFL players that Penn State has, obviously. They've got more NFL players than Purdue does. But it emphasized to me that when you start taking NFL players off this roster, you give yourself no chance to compete. And I've been critical about things, I think justly, that decisions Ryan Walters made and tacks that they took, you know what I mean? But this is a problem that Purdue has to fix no matter who's coaching the team next year. And I wanted to hear Ryan Walters kind of go into and kind of acknowledge that, like, yeah, that these are conversations that are happening right now. There's 2 games left in the season. They have to try to figure out a way to win them or at least compete better in them than they are. And at the same time, they are re-recruiting and trying to ensure player retention of the best players on this roster right now. And it's not just about NIL. NIL will be a big component of it, but other teams can offer things, other things too. They can offer you playing time, they can offer you exposure, and they can also offer you right now a way out of a pretty dark situation.
Yeah, this cannot, and I think as we were walking to our cars after the game, I said, every 3-star talent like a Max Clare that you find that materializes and becomes a standout player and proves, they're one of the best in a conference like the Big Ten at their position. Purdue can't become a farm system that gets these guys, develops them for a couple of years, and then they go somewhere that's, competing for national championships or in that kind of conversation, which is exactly what happened a year ago with the 2 players you just mentioned. And NIL came to play there. Sounds like Purdue's better than it was a year ago NIL wise, but probably not where it's competitive with. Listen, we just saw Indiana give its coach $8 million a year,
right?
And Purdue's sitting there flip flopping over, whatever the buyout is for Walters, $9 million. Money should.
They give that. They're paying their coach that each year. And listen, NIL will be a component here. Ryan Walters now, and it's been in press conference situations, which is different sometimes than when you can pull somebody aside and get a more nuanced answer. And I have not done that. And I guess nobody has gotten that on the record or otherwise, it doesn't seem like. But he has twice now, like he'd said it a couple weeks ago, I've got everything I need to succeed here. I asked him today at the end of that explanation he was giving about how this is working with player retention. He said, I asked, are you more confident that you will be able to do that this year than you did a year ago when they couldn't do that? And he said, absolutely, which I think is the same answer he gave to the other. So, but that's not what I'm necessarily hearing from everyone. I think there is still more consternation around the NIL situation at Purdue. And I did something last night. I went and I walked the concourse at Mackey Arena, and I was looking for any evidence of a what do I want to say? A reference to Boilermaker Alliance, which is the collective, the NIL collective around Purdue. I might have missed it. I could not find one. And there was a table that was set up. It was like informational table. And it said like, oh, ask about being I can't remember what the abbreviation was. So I went over and asked them like, oh, do you have information about Boilermaker Alliance? They're like, oh, no, this is really John Purdue Club stuff. You should just go on their website and find out about that. I'm like, okay. So today before the game, I walked the concourse in Ross-Ade multiple times. And there is more reference to Boilermaker Alliance there. There's like 3 or 4, like one sheet, like 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. They're just up on some posts on the East concourse. And if on the little video boards, and then the big video board, there's a Boilermaker Alliance QR code that scrolls through. But you can't, like,
You
it's
got to be ready for it when it's up there.
it's not like being very aggressive about it. I'll say that. And I think there is maybe still some conflict between even people within the greater Purdue apparatus who are not, I'm not saying this about Mike Babinski or Ryan Walters. I think it's beyond them. Like, but they're probably, you don't feel the aggressive urgency that they have to raise money to do this. And
That's fair.
I was trying to imagine myself today as a Purdue fan thinking, you know what? I'm ready. I want to contribute. I want to go get money directly to the players. How do I do that? You really have to search. If you're not paying attention to the video board before the game, the jumbo board, maybe you're not even in the stadium, because there weren't people in the stadium when I saw it, because I was out there watching Keelan Crimmon's punt or whatever. If you don't see that, then you may miss it. It's on these like little TVs that it scrolls through for just a few seconds. It's on those pieces of paper that are not prominent in any way. And I went to the team store because I'm like, okay, who can I go buy a jersey? I wasn't going to buy one. For Matt Glennesk out there watching, like, I wasn't going to expense a Max Clare jersey or a Dylan Thieneman jersey. But I go out there and I'm like, okay, which jerseys can I buy? What jersey can you walk in the stadium, buy that jersey, and part of that money is going to the players? None. You can't do it in Ross-Ade Stadium. They have jerseys, but they're player-worn jerseys, but they were worn by players who had that number before these players got here. They're just old jerseys.
Purdue has an NIL store in Wabash Landing that sells T-shirts of individual, and it's mostly basketball, I believe.
Probably,
players,
yeah.
So
the woman who was there, I mean, very nice. I asked, and she said that they weren't able to. I think they maybe will be able to do that in the future. They weren't able to do it this year. Something was in the way. There's also the manpower of turning that around real quick. To which I was like, I know, but why wouldn't there just be Hudson Card jersey, Devin Mockabee jersey? And it was referred again to the website, which for a lot of people will work. It's just not, if somebody were wanting to make an impulse buy and get money to the players, it's not there. And it just, I was looking for it. I was like trying hard to find, and I had to actually walk the concourse a couple times before I noticed those one sheet things about Boilermaker Alliance with a QR code. I just feel like, I'm very curious how this winter is going to play out, regardless of who's coaching this team, because everybody's talking about next fall and the house settlement and all that stuff. But that's theoretical money you may have eventually or will have, but it doesn't really affect, I don't think, the negotiations are going on this winter. And those are going to be critical. If you want this team to win more games next year, you have to keep the best players here.
Credit to Ryan Walters for this. Whether you think CJ Madden and CJ Smith and all these guys that he got through the portal with NIL money are producing or worth what they're getting paid is irrelevant. He did the money he got to get those players. Ryan Walters was specifically going out and fundraising for his program. Now, I can tell you some of the major programs around the country, the head coach isn't having to go out and basically beg people for money to go get players, because you're going to get those donations a lot of places just through the marketing.
Well,
the Alliance or whatever it is.
Right. Well, but a lot of places there are, like at the top, like I saw this with Ohio State. Like they didn't actually really, they went on a spending spree this last winter. I don't know if people noticed, and they weren't really in a position to do that until Ryan Day picked up the phone and got important people on the line and talked them into giving money. But that's like getting in that upper tier where you're trying to spend $20 million. Purdue is never going to do that. But Ryan Walters is already, again, I've talked to people like, when he's hired, one of the things he's doing is like getting on a plane and going to Texas. And it's not just to see Hudson Card. It's you're sometimes meeting with donors, and that's going on all over the country, or you're getting on calls with them and trying to. And now I think the problem that Purdue has is it's got to go to some of those same people and ask for that money again. Right. And you just invested in a season that went 1-11. And I think those are hard conversations. So again, he's saying he's got everything he needs. And, but he's also not one to throw people into the bus, really. I'm just, the proof will be in the pudding, I think, of what we see in the next 6 weeks or so.
But now you're bidding against yourself to keep your own players.
Well, and you're not just bidding against yourself; you're bidding against other teams. People are talking about
Max Clear has more value to Purdue because of his ties to Purdue, I think, than
Well-
somebody that can just come and throw a big number at him.
yes, and I don't like using player whoever is
Player
on
X.
Purdue's roster now that they want to keep. It does reemphasize how critical high school recruiting is, because when you already have someone on your roster, you would rather that Purdue's only chance to get players of that caliber is to already have them on the roster and be able to offer them something to stay. Really, that unless it gets kind of fortunate in the transfer portal. And great players have come through the transfer portal before. Like, people might remember Michigan State, the year that they were in the top 5 when Purdue beat them. They got Kenneth Walker from the transfer portal. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL now, or at least a really good one, helping my fantasy team, one of them. So, I mean, I lost my train of thought a little bit, but like the high school recruiting is going to be super critical, because if you get the guy here and you develop him, then when other people come for him, you only have to play defense.
Right.
If that guy's just out there already at somebody else's program and you're the one who has to then go out and try to coax them away, that's a lot more difficult.
I think that, and probably a failure on my part not asking after Ryan Walters had responded to you that kind of about how he's confident he can keep the guys here more so than a year ago. Those weren't his guys who left. Those were Jeff Brom recruits, and these are guys that he's been in the houses with the families and
that
sat
helps.
down and had dinners, and you
Probably.
feel like there's probably a connection there. But also,
Assuming he stays.
right. I think that's probably why he believes that. Now, probably should have asked for verification on that, but it would seem like that would be, more connection maybe with those guys he's currently got who are freshmen and sophomores on the roster.
I think that's a factor, but also like what's going on right now with assistant coaches. One of the possible ways that this plays out is Purdue keeps Ryan Walters, but you're going to see a real turnover on the assistant coaching. Like I said, everybody's on a 2-year contract except Kevin Kane has another year as a coordinator. He was on a 3-year deal, and Chris Petrilli, the special teams coach, this is only his first year here, so he has a 2-year deal. So he would still be under contract next year. Every other position coach is on a 2-year deal, and it expires at the end of this season. So, which coaches being retained would help you keep players, and which coaches not being retained would help you keep players. Like that dynamic, I think, is again, conversation I'm having. Those sorts of dynamics are happening behind the scenes. So we have not talked X's and O's really about this game at all.
There's nothing. It was 49-10. Tyler Warren played fullback. He played tight end. He threw a pass that ended up getting thrown back to him for a huge gain. There was a difference in talent level in this game.
There certainly is. But I did think that like how bold Penn State was being at times compared to how bold Purdue is not. Either is not or cannot be. Because I think it is easier to like pull something out of your hat, like the lateral to the quarterback who's lined up as receiver, who then does the throwback screen across the field to you for a wide open touchdown. That's easier to do when you have confidence that the other team is not going to drive the ball on you probably at all, and that you can go back and conventionally just drive the field. I mean, I thought this game was decided in all intents and purposes. 80-yard drive to start the game, 93-yard drive on the second possession for Penn State. It's 14-0. And Purdue's not going to outscore. Purdue's probably not going to score 17 points against Penn State. So game's over, essentially. And so then when it's first and goal again, this is the second week in a row, or fourth and goal from like the 3 or whatever it was. 5 today. It was a 3 last week. Both times he decides to kick field goals. There was only 7-0 against Penn State or against Ohio State. It's 14-0 today. In both cases, I think they should go for it. And maybe there's actually some value like to not be getting shut out again, to like ensure that you're not getting shut out for the third time this year, which I think is just a black mark that would linger in a different way than just even losing 49-10. To lose 49-0 would have been worse. But I just think you've got to be bold, and you've got to show some confidence in everybody on that field that like we can get 5 yards. We've got a play that can get 5 yards. But I don't know if there's also the whole matter of, does he have confidence in himself as a play caller to that extent? And it's
But
understandable if he
you just had a play
doesn't.
that worked on 2nd and goal. That if Denylon Morissette is not standing out of bounds,
Oh
it's a
my God.
touchdown.
God, that was just like that epitomizes so many things about this team. And I feel a little bit bad for Denylon Morissette because I retweeted the video, but like that thing went viral. Like for people who didn't see it, he's running a path, he's running a route in the back of the end zone and just kind of fans out of bounds, and it just ends up. And I don't know why Purdue paints its end zone this way. I think it's probably a worthwhile question for Mike Bobinski at some point, but he then sets up and he's basically like, he's within the back corner where the paint meets, but it's like, but that's not the edge of the field. The edge of the field is a few yards inside, whatever it is, 5 yards inside that. And so he's just standing behind the pylon, flat-footed, and catches a wide open pass, but he's out of bounds. And even if he had been inbounds by the time he caught the pass, a flag was thrown because it would have been illegal touching. Touchdown wouldn't have counted. Like, it was just so many, like, another thing where like it was just gonna not, it just wasn't gonna work. Like Purdue it wasn't gonna work. I don't know what to say. It was damned if they did, damned if they didn't.
Yeah, and that is the story of Purdue's football season. To this point, there is still 2 games left. I don't really have a lot of confidence it's going to get turned around, nor does seems like many other people. But one place where things are going well is Mackey Arena for the men's basketball team, and I guess we'll transition there to
I want to say one more quick thing about football.
Go ahead.
I and you both tweeted out the picture of what the crowd looked like at the end of this game. I think you created with like 12 minutes left. I'm going to keep saying tweets. I don't care, Elon. And I sent mine with like 9 minutes left. Very sparse, right? This was still a pretty full stadium at the beginning of this game. And I think it's only fair to say both of those things. And I did tweet out pictures of both of those things because one is much more stark than the other. And it shouldn't be acceptable for in any game to have your home stadium just emptied out against a conference team. Like, I'm sorry, like that's emblematic of where Purdue is and where it should not be. But I want to just commend the people who were there at the start of the game. Like, there is still a good element. We can sometimes get tied up in the echo chamber on X or whatever, Friendster, whatever you're using, Blue Sky. But there was still a full stadium at the start of this game, or a largely full stadium at the start of this game.
There were a couple student section that were empty, but it was the top corners and things of that sort, which is for a 1-8 coming into this game football team. And there were Penn State fans there, yes, but it wasn't noticeable that there was a lot of Penn State fans like when you've seen Ohio State in the past or Michigan come to Ross-Ade and just kind of absorb that stadium. I
mean, a 1-8 team and a 30-some point spread or whatever it was.
And it's not warm out either.
Yeah, it wasn't a great day, although it wasn't that bad. 50s. But anyway, so I want to make sure that is out there, that it's not fair to just pick on the end result. The end result is bad. It's fair to point it out, but I think the context has to be there was a good crowd to start the game too. So that would actually be more concerning if like people aren't showing up to start the game. And Purdue football has gotten to that point before where the place is half full basically at the start of games, and they're not at that point.
So last week I wrote a story about Markel Jones, a former Purdue running back who played during the Darrell Hazel era and then played for Jeff Brom at the end of his career. And I had asked him, because he was on a team that was very, very bad at Purdue, and I said, is this worse than when you played? Because he was, people that don't know, he's a pilot now, and he was flying Purdue back from Columbus, Ohio to West Lafayette. And he said it was worse when he played because fans weren't in the stands.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty telling. Like, at least there are people who still come to the games at this point of the season, and whether they believe or not, like, they're still showing up and supporting the team.
Right now, there's a lot of anger, and especially from, again, the vocal people that we run into on social media. But there isn't apathy, and that's where it's headed if things don't turn around. Because that would be true of any fan base, but it's not there yet. Anyway, we should talk some basketball because we didn't do one of these last night. Maybe we should have, but I had to get home, get back here. It's late. 87-78, Purdue beats Alabama. That's two Final Four teams getting on the court together. Alabama was up. I can't remember the time, But it's fairly, getting into the second part of the second half, or like midway through the second half.
Before the CJ Cox explosion, Alabama, I think, was up 6.
They were up
with
6.
10 minutes to go.
Right. It was like, like I said, like midway through the second half. And it felt like, oh, maybe this is where it gets away from Purdue a little bit. And maybe Alabama just has too many athletes, and Purdue's youngest players aren't ready for this yet.
And Braden Smith is actually taking a breather at this point.
Right. And and Braden Smith was having a not great shooting game. Trey Coffin-Wren played a really gritty game, I thought, but he had a lot of shots that didn't fall, even, from around the basket. You had the foul trouble with the bigs. So, like, there was a lot of things that seemed like they might be, oh, maybe this all kind of piles up here, and they just don't have enough to keep up with Alabama. And then CJ Cox hits 3 threes on 3 straight possessions, just like bang, bang, bang. And it's 52 seconds, 9 points, and Purdue leads and never trails again. They were up by at least 4 the rest of the game. It went from a 1-point deficit to an 8-point lead, and off to the rate, or 2-point deficit to a 7-point lead. They never trailed by more than 4. So I thought, like, what I wrote about after the game, and Cox was the best example of this. He had an awesome game, but the defense that Jakari Harris played early in this game, like, Mark Sears didn't attempt a shot in the first 7 minutes of this game, didn't make a basket in the first 12 minutes of that game or something like that. He had a very inefficient night eventually, and it wasn't just Jakari Harris, but he got it started on defense. Riley Burgess only played 4 minutes, but it seemed like more than that. And those 4 minutes were kind of massive because of that foul trouble that Berg and Trey Coffin-Wren were in. They had to go with Caleb First and Raleigh Burgess and a different front court, and he steps up and hits a huge wide open 3. I asked Nate Oates after the game about what they had on their scout for CJ Cox. I'm very interested to know what they had on their scout about Raleigh Burgess, because he was a guy who almost wasn't going to play this year and take a red shirt. And he had a tip in right after that. Like, I thought it was just a massive
3 was a
4
second
minutes.
chance basket too, I believe. It was a
Yeah,
rebound and kick out.
Not his, but I think it was Fletcher Lawyer got an offensive rebound and kicked it out to him. So just some really big moments from those freshmen. And it's coming into this season, you knew there was this triumvirate of returning starters. And then it was like, okay, there's a lot of other answers maybe to these questions, but when do they line up? How do they line up? What's going to happen? And one win doesn't make your season, and one win in November doesn't make anybody's season. But I thought it was an important night for maybe those 3 young guys, especially. And I hate that we can't mention Daniel Jacobson here, who was playing fine before he got what is maybe a season-ending injury. He should be in this conversation too, of the way Purdue has asked a lot of these freshmen this year. Matt Painter was talking about after the game, like, they don't take a bunch of transfers. He wasn't really like blowing smoke at, or he wasn't throwing shade at Alabama when he said that, but Alabama's a example of it, a team that has used the portal a lot. Purdue didn't do that. It went and brought in these freshmen. It's asked them to do big things, and they did big things on Friday night.
Yeah, and Matt Painter said this numerous times throughout the tournament run last year. And listen, the last few years, he's had David Jenkins, who was a 5th-year transfer. He had Lance Jones, who was a 5th-year transfer, who were just kind of like the right guy for what Purdue needed in that scenario. That wasn't there. Matt Painter isn't just going to add guys to add guys. And he also had a pretty large freshman class that ended up being 1 player smaller than it was anticipated to be. But he said last year that we're not going to live in the portal, and he said that's probably going to burn me at some point, but he's kind of old school and he wants to go watch high school games. He wants to find players that fit his system, get them to Purdue, and then have them, play roles until they play different roles, basically. So.
Well, it goes back to the football conversation. Like, what's the most efficient way to have good players in your system is to go find them yourself, sign them, and develop them, because then someone's got to come take them away from you. And Purdue takes a kind of unique, I guess, basketball wise approach to NIL, with like everybody kind of gets the same thing. Right. And then if you're a star and you go get more, that's fine. Right. But it doesn't seem like they do a lot of like negotiating. It's kind of like, people remember, like, what was it, like Saturn, the car company, where it's just like, hey, that's what it costs. Come on the lot and you can have it at that price. That may be wildly off. I'm not really a car guy. But my point being that, like, I think
there's a blanket amount and it's spread equally. Yeah. And then, yes, Fletcher Lawyer gets more money than some of these guys. Braden Smith gets more money than some of these guys. But those are aside from what the amount going into the basketball collective is that's being dispersed evenly.
But yeah, and what I was getting at was what Painter's not wrong that there's going to be a point where he has to take. Listen, you've got these three guys together right now. Maybe they are all still around next year, but now you graduate three guys. But right now you can see the layers on this roster where you're going to have guys transfer out. And if that happens at the same time you also have just natural attrition, then it may be a thing where you have to go into the portal. He's used the portal a lot. Like I was covering the team when they got Sterling Carter and Eric Peck. This would have been 2013-14 season.
Evan Boudreaux was around that time period.
Evan Boudreaux was a little bit later, but it was John Octius the next year.
Yeah,
right. John Octius was a massive addition for that team that after 2 years out of the tournament got back in the next year. In a very late arriving player actually too. I don't think he got here until like October. But like they've used the portal well in the past, and it's always for that, get that key piece to help you either depth wise or balance, something like that. And yes, they will do that again. But I think he's not wrong to say I'm not going to go into each year thinking, what am I going to have to do in the portal to have a good team next year? You do it this way and then try to augment with the portal. Right. But we'll go ahead.
One thing kind of to the development point of it, because people have criticized Matt Painter's recruiting philosophy until it worked, that he's not going out and getting 5-star players. He's had one McDonald's All-American as long as he's been here, and that was Biggie Swanigan. Mm-hmm. And somebody 2 years ago, Purdue beat, I want to say Davidson at Gamebridge Fieldhouse, and somebody said, how do you do it recruiting 2- and 3-star guys? And his response was, people think that Braden Smith is not a 5-star guy because some recruiting network says he's not. And he said, they're 5 stars to me. Like when I watch him and think, what can Braden Smith do in Purdue's program? He's a 5-star recruit. So it's finding those diamonds in the rough, but also, how they fit into your program.
And frankly, and he's been upfront about this, he hasn't always been good about that. Like there have been early in his career, he made some mistakes chasing the talent. Yeah. And not only did he maybe not make the right decisions on who to go after, I had a conversation with him recently, and I'm going to write about it here pretty soon for Indy Star. But like CJ Cox was probably a guy that would have snuck away. Like you go and watch CJ Cox and you see good things, and then you think, I must be wrong because he's not being recruited by anybody else. And he's at this prep school. That's a good prep school, but like, he's like this guy on the East Coast, only the Ivy League is recruiting him. I must be wrong. And I think that over time, Matt Painter has developed a self-confidence from a recruiting standpoint.
He trusts himself.
Yeah. And when he thinks about it, it makes perfect sense. You kind of just like check the boxes in your head. It's like, oh wait, does he do this? Yeah. Does he do this? Yeah. Is he this kind of guy? Yes. Does he have this kind of family or whatever? Yes. Well, what are we waiting on? Like that's who we want. And they've made mistakes too about who they've taken, but they're making more correct decisions, I would say.
Yeah. Last night, what I thought maybe was, and we kind of got off topic here a little bit. I think this is where maybe you were going or where I was going to go, but I don't think there's a program in college basketball that has defined roles as well as Purdue does. Caleb Furst was a 4-star guy who came here and was starting as a young player and then became not even a role player. He was on the end of the bench not playing last year. And
he was the fourth when Jacobson was healthy. He was the 4th big coming into games.
And he comes in a huge moment, gives you a spark, takes a charge last night, I think he got a layup early, ends up hitting 2 free throws at the end of the game that were big and kind of helped Purdue pull away. But these guys are just like in the moment, always ready. And I talked to Cam Heide about this a couple of weeks ago because he's a guy that I think could play at a lot of places and play a lot more than he does at Purdue. And he said, yeah, but you come here because you want to win. And there's so many guys on this roster, and Jakari Harris even told me about this last week as well. Like, I didn't come to Purdue to be the star as a freshman or go out and score 17 points a game. I came to Purdue because there's a great culture and it's a proven winner and proven developer of talent. And that's kind of Purdue's selling point right now, and it's working. And that's why you get 10 players. Jacobson would have played that game last night if he was healthy. Obviously, probably would have started that game. But you played 10 players in that game last night, and I thought all 10 of them at some point had a moment where they affected the game in some way, even if it's a small way. Miles Colvin is a guy that can score, as he's shown, 10 or 15 points off the bench, and he didn't attempt a field goal last night.
No, I thought that was a huge night for him. And it was something I was talking to him about before the season, because I think that had been that was out there that, like, is he a guy who plays through his shot too much? Is he someone who goes out and can get it done defense and rebounding wise? And we saw him start to do that, I thought, a little bit in the scrimmage. I thought there were a couple of moments in the inter-squad that we saw on whatever that was, a Saturday when the football team was off that one weekend, or maybe they played on Friday. It was a Friday. It was after the Oregon game. I saw like hints of it there. And then early in the season, he had like a big scoring night off the bench. He scored like 12 points or 14 in the first half of one of those games, hit a bunch of threes. But I thought last night was just a massive night for him to have the kind of contribution he did without taking a shot. There was a point where I thought when Jacobson got hurt, I thought, well, Purdue can't beat teams like Alabama or like Marquette, who they're going to play on Tuesday. Like, they can't win those games without Caleb First playing well now. Like, he's going to have to be a guy, because Raleigh Burgess is a true freshman who they like a lot of things about him, but still obviously has some rough edges, as all freshmen do, that he is smoothing out still right now. And you can't just expect it all to be Will Berg, who is having now it's twice already, including the Creighton game, where foul trouble has been a problem for him. So that's something he's got to figure out. Now, that's been lessened a little bit by how much Matt Painter is willing to play this small ball lineup. This is 2 games in a row where they've leaned on it in critical times and just let Trey Kaufman-Renn kind of cook underneath and use his low post moves. And that worked against Alabama. It worked down the stretch against Yale. And by going to that more and more, it means that then you can take 4 minutes from Raleigh Burgess and 12 maybe from Caleb First. And so it doesn't have to be a 25 minute night from some of those guys. You get to get the best of them for a brief stretch and then move on to the next thing. It can be kind of like a bridge to that smaller lineup.
Yeah. Now, Tuesday is going to be a different challenge because Purdue is playing on the road against a marquee opponent. I think when we did this last week, we both said we thought Purdue would win, and Mackey would have a factor in that. And
I think that happened. Yeah.
When CJ Cox hit the 3 threes, that place exploded. When Braden Smith dives and throws a ball off a guy's leg and tumbles over the table.
Yeah.
Like noise overload. That is the Mackey advantage that you're going to have. And now you've got to take that on the road, and then, the neutral site things will probably not be an issue because there's not, typically there's not a lot of fans at those type of things. But I think Tuesday will tell us quite a bit, especially if you can kind of stack these good performances, at least 8 deep, but even 10 deep on top of each other, because come tournament time, Purdue's probably going to have great contributions from these freshmen who right now are playing maybe more of a limited role. CJ Cox is not going to score 11 points every night, but you want to know that you have the capability to put him in, and he can do that.
Yeah, that covers it. I think I'm sleepy. I got to drive back to Indianapolis. I'm also
die too,
and that too. And I haven't had I'm hungry. I haven't had a dinner yet. Wisconsin was beating Oregon at halftime. I don't know what's happened in that game since then, but things are interesting out there in the college football world today. Seen some other weird things. LSU losing at Florida by 11, 12 points.
It means this all, Purdue still has a chance. 2 games left.
Wisconsin's still leading Oregon. Look like 17-14. No, that's Tennessee, Georgia. Sorry.
Let's see here. Oh, it's on SEC. Why am I looking at SEC?
No. Wherever.
13-13 in the fourth quarter.
Well, there you go, folks. 2 teams that combined to beat Purdue 87-6 are battling into the fourth quarter. Number 1 team in the country against Wisconsin. So we will have more. I imagine we will do one of these Tuesday after the Marquette game, or do something to kind of wrap that up, because
we're still awake.
Yeah, that will be a late one. Yeah, but it's an interesting kind of like these 2 games go hand in hand. Matt Painter basically said that, like, they want to get 2 non-conference games like this every year, home and home. So next year they go to Alabama, Marquette comes to Mackey, and then they'll try to get another home and home set up for the 2 years after that, outside of the exempt tournaments, outside of whatever TV is putting together. The first thing Nate Oates said when he got to the press conference last night was like, well, we play this game for a reason. Right, yeah. And it's kind of what I wrote about going into that game was like, well, they've got this non-conference winning streak, But the only reason the non-conference winning streak has value is because they keep playing games like having Alabama come to Mackey, and they keep winning them, or they keep going into these exempt tournaments and beating the best teams in the country.
Yeah, I think I looked it up last night, and during this stretch of 39 straight non-conference regular season wins now, Purdue's beaten North Carolina, which I believe was a top 5 team at the time, beaten Gonzaga twice, beaten Duke, beaten Marquette multiple times, Florida State multiple times, Villanova back when Jay Wright was still coaching the team. It's pretty impressive. Now there's quite a bit of bye games in there as well, but I don't know. I think I saw a stat today that Purdue has more than doubled the next team in terms of beating top 5 opponents over whatever the certain period of time is, because Purdue keeps scheduling them. And if you're in a position like Purdue's basketball team is, where you think you can compete for national championships now, you better be playing these types of schedules. Tom Izzo was a big proponent of it, and he would say, listen, we might start out 6-4, but get better because of it.
Yeah, and listen, it doesn't make Purdue invincible. You look at the 3 teams that beat them in the regular season last year. It was Northwestern, Ohio State, and who was the third one? You were there. Nebraska. So you had a team that didn't even make the tournament and 2 teams that went out, I believe, in the first game. So, it doesn't make you invincible, but it definitely, I think, pays off in March, and we'll see if that happens again. Assuming they can stay healthier the rest of this way, they can keep this group intact, then it might be a thing that pays off again for them in March. I'm Nathan Baird from Indy Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
We will talk to you again soon.
That Nebraska game was